My jacket is ready now to the point where I have to attach the bottom of the lining in the sleeve to the cuff. So I've got my jacket turned inside out so the lining is facing outward. I've made sure that my underarm seam matches up with the same underarm seam of the outer layer so I don't have it twisted, because I've done that before. I've got my cuff turned into the right side of the sleeve. So what's showing at the top of the sleeve now is the seam allowance. So I've marked my halfway point with a pin, and I've marked my halfway point in the lining with a little slash. So what I want to do is I'm going to turn my lining fabric to the wrong side so that I'm matching up. So there's, I folded it now so my seam is turned, my seam allowance is turned in to the wrong side, and now I'm going to flip it over and match that fold to the seam line where I've sewn the cuff. So I'm folding it in, and then I'm going to take that pin, no, I'm going to take another pin, and I'm going to pin them together at that point, because when I get it all turned around, this is where it has to match. And I'm going to put my hand through the opening that I left in the sleeve lining, and I'm going to turn this, pull it through, so that now I can see where I'm at. So here's my cuff. The cuff elastic is turned to the good side, and there's my lining where I've turned the seam allowance to the wrong side. So I'm matching the right side of the seam allowance of the cuff to the right side of the lining fabric. Got a bunch of pins in there that are going to be in my waist, but I'm carefully going to pull them out and just sort of reline things up again and put a pin in it. So the idea now is that I'm going to go to the sewing machine, which is right here, and I'm going to show you how I'm sewing all around to catch the lining to the cuff. I'm just going to get this pin out of the way. I'm going to move my camera a little bit now so I'm swinging a little closer to the sewing machine. And I've got white thread in so you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So I'm going to get it in under the presser foot, right where that pin is. And I'm going to use my hand wheel, and I'm going to put the needle in just to the left of where I sewed the cuff to the outer layer. Now I can get this pin out of here, and good sides are together here. I'm going to lay and smoothing it out. The elastic is loose inside that cuff, so it's easy enough to manipulate it. And now I'm going to sew just to the left of the original sewing line. I'm using my needle down function so that when I move all this stuff, I don't pull it. Sorry about bumping the camera there. So I don't pull it out from under the presser foot. So just a little bit at a time, and over we go. And at some point, the seams are going to match up, and the lining is made of polar fleece, so it's really stretchy. So it may have stretched a little bit. So I'm hoping that when I get to this seam here, that we kind of match. We do not. So now I have to try and ease in the fabric of the lining so that it matches up with this sleeve seam when I get there. So I'm using this tool, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of pushing just a little bit. So I'm pushing it towards my needle, not enough to make a pleat, but enough to take a little, to work in a little bit of ease. And then I'm sewing about an inch. And I'm doing the same thing again. So sewing just a little bit at a time. And eventually, we're getting closer. It's really fiddly, but it can be done. A little bit at a time. But now you see how important it is to have that needle down. So if your machine doesn't have that as a function, you'll be doing this with your hand over to the right, playing with the hand wheel all the time. So there's my seam, and there's my seam, so I've almost got them matched up. Almost there. I'd say we're good. And then I'm just going to work my way around. Again and still, I'm easing and working the excess stretchy polar fleece into the seam. Fortunately, it's not a long seam. This was a difficult combination. This nylon, non-stretchy, non-anything, to try and get it to cooperate with the polar fleece. Sometimes I got a little frustrated. I did more ripping in this jacket. So this is Jalie's pattern Maxime. It's a 3-season jacket. And I made it before with a heavier fabric. I think we've only got a little ways to go here. And I'm going to stick with it till we get to where we want to be. Because I'd really like this to be finished. I've had enough of it. But see, we're almost home. Have a little bit more easing to do here. Oops, there goes the tool on the floor. Oh, come back here, you. Okay. A little more. And a little more. And a little bit more. And we're there. So when I get back to where I started, I'm just going to overlap by about 5 or 6 stitches. I'm going to do a reverse, just because, and then I'm going to cut my thread. All that's left now then is to pull that cuff through the lining, through the hole in the lining. And there it is. There's our cuff with the lining. This is the inside. It looks just as good on the outside. And that's how I do it.